The Winslow family's monthly get-togethers weren't really about sharing a meal. They were more like full-on bragging contests with cocktails. That night, inside my uncle's palatial estate just outside Sonoma, I braced myself for the usual circus. I took my usual seat by the fireplace and watched my cousins try to outdo each other in the ego department. Picked up a horse ranch in Aspen, drawled Grayson, lazily spinning the stem of his wine glass. Turns out my new neighbor owns half of Silicon Beach. Cute, Brooke said with a smirk, snapping open her luxury clutch like it was a show. We just locked down a vineyard in Provence. Private path to the Mediterranean. Views like that don't even have a price tag. I hid a grin behind my iced tea. If only they knew. Nina, you've been awfully quiet. Aunt Valerie's sharp voice cut through the chatter. Grayson leaned toward me, fake concern painted all over his face. We were just wondering how things are going with your living arrangements. And there it was. What about them? I asked, setting my glass down. That tiny duplex in Portland, he said with a smirk. Still renting, huh? Brooke added, pretending to be shocked. Didn't realize people our age still did that. I almost laughed out loud. That so-called tiny duplex on Alder Lane? It was the first acquisition my company, Redwood Equity, made. They thought I was a renter. In reality, I was their landlord. I like the place, I said calmly. You're 35, sweetheart, and Valerie added with that signature condescending smile. Time to get serious. Invest in something real. Real? I almost laughed again. Try a real estate portfolio worth over $1.8 billion, apartment buildings, office towers, and yes, Winslow Square. The very property we were all sitting in. I'd bought it through a shell company 6 months ago, quietly and anonymously. I'm managing just fine, I said. Grayson chuckled. You can't even qualify for a mortgage. I leaned back and let them keep talking. Soon enough, the lease renewal paperwork would show up on their desks, and guess whose name would be at the top? Dad finally looked up from his glass. Easy, Grayson. Not everyone's got your razor-sharp business sense. Nina made her choices, Valerie added with a sigh, like I'd let the family down by not marrying some tech billionaire or becoming an Instagram lifestyle coach. They pictured me schlepping around Portland, showing crummy walk-ups to broke grad students, scraping by on commission. What they didn't know. Nina Hale, the family screw-up, was also the founder and silent owner of Redwood Equity, the firm that had quietly acquired residential and commercial properties up and down the Pacific Northwest for the past 10 years. Speaking of real estate, Brooke jumped in with a spark in her eye. Did you hear about that big buyout on Alder Lane? Some firm bought the whole block. They're gonna level it. She gave me a fake pout. Looks like your little apartment's getting the boot. I kept my face neutral. That buyer? It was me. And I had zero plans to tear anything down. That block was a hidden gem, classic brick buildings, original woodwork, and long-standing tenants protected by rent control. I was overseeing a thoughtful restoration, not demolition. Really? I asked, feigning surprise. Hadn't heard anything. Of course not, Grayson scoffed. Deals like that are way over your head. If you get evicted, Aunt Valerie added with a cheerful tone, you can always crash in the guest house. We'll help you find something more appropriate. Maybe even someone appropriate. I'm good, I said flatly. And my landlord's happy, too. Brooke let out a tight laugh. You can't live small forever, honey. The Hale name used to mean something around here. The Winslow name still held weight, just not in the way they imagined. In real estate circles, Redwood Equity was known for smart growth and putting tenants first. Pretty much the exact opposite of the flashy, community-flattening projects my cousins loved to flaunt. Actually, Dad said, setting down his wine, tonight's dinner has a business angle. The board's been raising concerns about the new majority stakeholder in Winslow Square. I tilted my head. Redwood Equity acquired the stake about 6 months ago, he said. But no one knows who's behind it. Might be some overseas investor. Grayson nodded like he'd cracked the case. Has to be. These foreign billionaires go nuts for legacy properties. If only they knew the mysterious investor they were all speculating about was sitting right in front of them in second-hand boots and a cardigan from a thrift store. And now, Dad continued, they're digging into our books, asking serious questions about creative accounting, like how Grayson used the building's repair fund to finance his Aspen horse ranch, or how Brooke expensed her luxury handbag collection as client outreach. I'm sure it's nothing to worry about, Aunt Valerie said, her pearl necklace twitching like it had picked up on the tension in the room. That's the problem, Dad interrupted. This Redwood group doesn't care about old names. They've ordered a full audit. And just like that, you could see it, panic, barely concealed behind their carefully practiced smiles. An audit would expose far more than just sketchy bookkeeping. It'd tear their whole operation apart. Maybe Nina could help, Brooke piped up suddenly, all sweetness and fake charm. She's in real estate, isn't she? Maybe she knows someone at the firm. Like clockwork, every eye turned to me. 1 second I was the family's walking disappointment. The next, I was potentially useful. I mostly handle smaller residential projects, I said coolly. Nothing on the scale of Winslow Square. For God's sake, Grayson snapped, you can't even help your own family? Mom shot him a warning look, but said nothing. Even Dad went back to scrolling through his phone. No one had a clue how helpful I was about to be, just not in the way they wanted. Tomorrow morning, Redwood Equity was dropping a public announcement. Effective immediately, Winslow Square would begin a full operational overhaul. No more secret budgets. No more sweetheart contracts to relatives. No more treating the property like the family's personal ATM. I scanned the penthouse we were sitting in. Paintings bought with funds meant for roof repairs. Sofas that cost triple what they should. Light fixtures installed by Brooke's husband's company with bloated invoices and kickbacks baked in. Well, I said, standing and brushing off my jeans, some of us have early mornings. Brooke smirked. Off to show another rent-controlled shoebox? I slung my worn leather tote over my shoulder. Inside it? Legal documents, project budgets, and board materials worth more than everything in that room combined. Nina, Aunt Valerie called after me in her sugary tone. Next time, maybe dress like a Winslow. Appearances do matter. I gave her a small smile. Don't worry, I said. Tomorrow, I'll look exactly the way a Winslow should. They just didn't know I already ran the whole operation. If you've been silently rooting for Nina this whole time, don't miss what happens when the doors to the boardroom fly open. Subscribe to the channel so you're first to see what unfolds when the family finally realizes that the girl they once dismissed now holds all the power. The next morning, I stood inside my real office. A full penthouse floor overlooking downtown Portland. Everything had led to this moment, the one I'd been working toward for over a year. Isla, my assistant, swept in and placed a cappuccino next to my laptop. The board from Winslow Square is already assembled, she said. Your family showed up early. Tried to charm the independent members. I couldn't help the grin that tugged at my lips. I pictured Grayson and Brooke awkwardly working the room, pitching smiles like sales tactics. All audit reports printed and handed out, Isla continued. The forensic team dug up even more than expected. She paused. You still want to go through with it? Once this happens, there's no going back. They need to understand, I said quietly, that having a family legacy doesn't give you the right to abuse it. I turned to the glass window, catching my reflection. The old me jeans, thrifted sweaters, was gone. Today, I wore a midnight blue Altuzarra suit. Crisp lines. Calm power. The exact kind of outfit Aunt Valerie always hoped I'd wear, to marry well, of course. Instead, I'd be wearing it to dismantle everything they thought made them untouchable. The announcement goes live in 20 minutes, Isla added. Once it hits, the mask comes off. Then let's start, I said. Grabbing my briefcase at I stepped into the Winslow Square boardroom. The room fell silent. My family huddled at one end of the table, nervous, underdressed, and completely blindsided. Who are you? Grayson barked, voice too loud for the tension in the room. This is a private meeting. I calmly placed my briefcase at the head of the table. I'm Nina Winslow, I said evenly. founder and sole owner of Redwood Equity, the company that owns this building and several others your family misused as collateral. Aunt Valerie's face drained of color. Brooke's mouth opened like she was about to speak, but nothing came out. My father's fingers clenched tight around his Mont Blanc pen. "Nina," he said, barely audible. I nodded once. "Good morning." I opened the case and slid a stack of audit packets across the polished table. "Shall we begin with the financials?" "This is insane," Grayson sputtered. You're just... what?" I asked, my tone calm. "The screw-up? The renter? The woman who wore the same thrifted boots 3 Thanksgivings in a row." Brooke blinked like her lashes could block reality. "But you just show apartments." "I work," I said simply. "And I built something real on purpose with principles, not illusion." Around the table, the board sat frozen. The proud Winslow family unraveled quietly, one report at a time. "These folders," I said, tapping the stack, "include full documentation of every misused dollar, padded invoice, and forged receipt." I passed the last folder to the far end. "Grayson, would you care to explain the $2.1 million roof repair that somehow became your ranch in Jackson County?" His face turned a dangerous red. For a second, I thought he might pass out. "Or Brooke," I said, flipping to the next tab, "maybe you'd like to explain how your husband's plumbing company billed us 3 times the market rate for fixtures that barely meet code. You'd humiliate your own family like this?" Aunt Valerie whispered. "No," I said, voice steady. "You aired this out." "I'm just here to disinfect it." Dad finally spoke, his voice worn and careful. "Nina, sweetheart, let's talk about this. We can explain." "Don't," I said, raising a hand. "I watched you all turn our great-grandfather's name into a punchline. While you mocked my simple life, I was building something stronger, based on values, not vanity." "But why?" Brooke asked. "Why pretend to struggle?" "I didn't pretend," I said. "I chose to live modestly. I invested quietly. You thought wealth had to scream. I knew it could whisper and still be powerful." "The older street property," Grayson murmured. "You really live there?" "I own it," I corrected. "And most of that block. And no, I'm not tearing it down just to install another overpriced steakhouse. Some of us still care about people." Suddenly, the room filled with buzzing phones. Notifications flying in like sparks from a live wire point. One of the board members looked up, reading from her screen. "Redwood Equity reveals CEO's identity. Nina Winslow confirmed as owner of $2 billion real estate portfolio." She blinked. "Ranked among top ethical developers. Tenant-first practices. Historic restoration." Brooke fumbled her phone. Her hands shook. "This will destroy us," she whispered, pale. "No," I said. "This will save you from yourselves. Effective immediately, Winslow Square will operate transparently. No backdoor deals. No family discounts. No shady side arrangements. And if we don't?" Grayson tried to summon his old confidence, but his voice cracked. I smiled thinly. "Then I'll forward everything to federal authorities. I imagine the IRS would love these binders." Silence dropped over the room like a weighted blanket. "What do you want?" my father finally asked. "I want you to remember what the Winslow name used to mean before the cars, the scandals, the debt." I looked each of them in the eye. "Grandfather built communities. He didn't just chase returns. So here's the deal." I stood, collecting my papers. "You can work with me to restore that legacy." I paused at the doorway. "Or find somewhere else to live. I hear Lake Oswego has some charming rentals." I turned to leave. "Nina, wait." Dad's voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "I was wrong about you." I didn't look back. "Yes," I said quietly. "You were." The fallout played out like the season finale of some corporate drama. Media outlets devoured the twist. The overlooked niece who had quietly built a $2 billion empire and brought her once powerful family to their knees in a single boardroom showdown. And Evelyn quietly resigned from 3 local boards, too ashamed to show her face at luncheons where her name once commanded rooms. Cassandra's husband's firm folded just weeks after the audit reports went public. But not all of it ended in bitterness. He was arrested. Finally facing actual consequences, AS for Cassandra, she enrolled in a public university's real estate certification program. Started volunteering at a transitional housing shelter downtown. She told me later it gave her more purpose than any of her gallery openings ever had, and Dad, he asked to learn the business, not as a father reclaiming power, but as a student. For the first time, he wanted to understand what I'd built. 6 months later, I was sitting in my older street apartment. Yes, I'd kept it, reviewing quarterly reports. The numbers were solid. Ashcroft Plaza was thriving. Lease renewals were strong. Tenant satisfaction was up. And the small businesses on the ground floor, turning healthy profits. Finally, a knock at the door pulled me from the data. I opened it to find my mother. Jeans. No makeup. No designer bag. I barely recognized her. She held up an invitation. Your courtyard holiday party? I nodded. It's not really your scene. She glanced around the cozy space. No, but I'm learning that maybe scene isn't everything. She picked up a photo, me at 23, holding my real estate license, beaming like the world had just opened its doors. I never asked, she said. Why real estate? Because I wanted to build something real, I replied. Not just buy it and show it off. She studied me for a long moment, then said quietly, and now you control more than all of us ever did. I do, I said. But control isn't the goal. Purpose is. She nodded slowly. Will you teach me? Come tonight, I said, gesturing to the invitation. Meet the families who've lived here for decades. Listen, that's where legacy begins. Later, I stood at my window, watching the lights shimmer across the Portland skyline. The city I'd quietly made mine. Ashcroft Plaza glowed in the distance, not as a monument to greed anymore, but as a symbol of repair. Below me, the older street building buzzed with quiet, grounded life. Original brickwork. Refinished beams. Garden courtyards lit with soft strings of light. My phone pinged. Partnership offers, keynote requests, acquisition proposals. West Pine Holdings was in high demand now. But I kept my schedule humane. My routine simple. Because success, true success, was never about outshining my past. It was about creating something that mattered. Something that would last. Sometimes, the person they pity becomes the one they must learn from, and sometimes, the best kind of triumph doesn't roar. It endures. A week later, at the Alder Street holiday party, I stood by the garden fountain, watching my family acclimate to a world they once dismissed. Mom sat beside Mrs. Lopez, a tenant here for 38 years, listening with genuine interest. Preston helped string lights with Mr. Keller, a World War II veteran and the longest-term resident. Cassandra laughed beside a table of kids, icing sugar cookies. Slowly, they were learning. Real wealth isn't in what you can flaunt. It's in what you preserve, what you share, what you elevate. Dad joined me near the cocoa table. You know, he said, your great-grandfather believed buildings should shelter hearts, not just wallets. I nodded, remembering the old ledgers I'd found, handwritten notes about protecting tenants. We'd forgotten that. He looked at me, not like a daughter who'd gone off track, but like someone who'd carried the torch he'd dropped. You could have ruined us. Never the point, I said, watching a little girl twirl under the fairy lights. I wanted to build something that would outlast me. And sometimes, the greatest success isn't in proving them wrong. It's in offering them a better version of right. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or quietly counted out, then maybe you see a little of yourself in me. I didn't set out to prove anyone wrong. I just wanted to build something real. Something that couldn't be taken away because it was rooted in values, not vanity. If my story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in my shoes? What have you built in silence while others doubted you? Let's talk about it. Let's give each other credit for the quiet work, the long nights, the tough choices, and if you're facing a moment like I once did, when the world expects nothing from you, don't shout louder. Just build stronger. You don't need approval to begin. You need purpose and consistency. The rest will come. Support this journey by subscribing to the channel. There are more stories ahead about resilience, redemption, and redefining success on your own terms, because legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you create. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming exactly who they said you couldn't be. So, subscribe, stay with me, and let's build something that lasts.